So everyone knows the Stanley Parable, right? Meta-humor, parody, critical analysis is the way games interact with their players while having an impeccable sense of humor and deeply self-aware of its own philosophical messages. Well, today I'm going to review its little brother, the Beginner's Guide. And boy oh boy, are they different. See, the studio that made Stanley Parable was primarily directed by two guys, Davey Royden and William Hug, who released the game in 2013. However, they didn't stay friends and split off into two separate studios after falling out. Davey's studio, Everything Unlimited Limited, and know that name's irony is not lost on me, would release the game in 2015. Now consider this a family. Stanley Parable was the child born when the family was happy and together, and Beginner's Guide was the child born after a messy divorce. When Stanley Parable was the overachiever, popular kid in school, Beginner's Guide was the emo, and it has dark themes, so be warned. But what do I really think of the game? Well, let's get mechanics out of the way. It's a walking simulator. Ta-da! Everyone's favourite genre! If that alone's already turned you off the game, I understand. But the true meat of this experience is in the story. The game starts with a narration from Davey Royden, talking about a friend who works under the name Coda. The first map is a simple Dust CS map. As Davey Royden explains, the game hopes to look into what was going on in the head of Coda during the period he was making small map experiences. And I wasn't kidding about the emo kid thing. The game gets heavy with some themes, and I'd love to show my reaction to all of that in a playthrough, but my audio from the recording's corrupted, which is a shame. The game isn't so straightforward as to hand you clear-cut answers, and the game is very aware that the viewer and the narrator would want them. Hell, the Wikipedia page for this game has a long-ass section dedicated to interpretation. So I'll run you through my interpretation, but I'm going to put a spoiler warning in now to skip the story elements. Not that there'll be much left to talk about. So the game's intro is the narrator telling you what I've already told you, as well as giving you his email address, which I really hope is fake, and him saying that he's made his compilation, hoping to reach Coda and introduce others to his work. The game's maps were made between 2008 and 2011, with each map explaining more about Coda, with the narrator pushing you towards explanations, while modifying the game to make things accessible to you. The next map is the game Escape from Whisper, a buggy spaceship FPS. Davey explicitly tells us that he wants to look at these games as they are, not as they should be. And despite their unfinished qualities, he's going to assume they are complete. Look, if this turns you off reminding you of an English lesson, I understand. Dislike and comment, go die in a sewer, and regret the minutes you've wasted on this video and never come back to my channel, and I'll understand. The game isn't for everyone. After making this game, Coda drops the project, like any quote-unquote good artist does, and chases the new idea lodged in his mind. The next map, Coda tries to troll a player by forcing them to only be able to walk backwards. Way to really shake up the walking simulator genre. And the next you walk a little on a path in the dark, and it ends. Now, it might sound like I'm being negative towards the game, out of spite or something. No. These maps are little pockets of interpretation that do really feel like the creative experience and experimentations of someone outside of the narrator. And as I was playing it, I kept wanting to know what Coda would try next, or what Coda had to do with Davey and why Coda stopped. But we'll get to that. In the next one, you walk a tower, getting progressively slower until you can't move anymore and the door at the top opens, and we're introduced to what the narrator is doing to Coda's games. He modifies it so you can now reach the top. It's the first time we see a gap in Coda's intended experience and Davey's interpretation of how the experiences should be. We're then introduced to a small puzzle with two doors, and the lever that's fairly easy to figure out. The narrator says we'll see that puzzle a lot. He's not joking. The narrator says that often as a player we don't get to see the full extent because it's often outside what can be experienced in the game despite its existence, which clearly means he hasn't looked into boundary breakers. We then do the walk in a dark zone again with an exit instead of an entering, establishing the idea that the game's maps are in fact connected and should be treated as such. Next map, a barnyard that looks like Courage the Cowardly Dog with platforming all the way down before being imprisoned. Narrator gives comment that games need to be playable and accessible, which, is a normal response to game design, whereas Coda doesn't care about that and sends him a bunch of blank games. Coda may be cool and deep, but you can't pretend he isn't a little bit of a wanker too. Spending 1 hour in a prison cell waiting for something to happen, if I wanted to do that, I'd watch The Bachelor with my parents. We do some exploring and meet up with these cube heads wanting to know what the puzzle was like, and we talk to them. That's right, the walking simulator has mechanics other than just walking and listening. Take that, flowers are dead, you piece of garbage. We get to the end of the game and we get a lamppost. This is important as it now stands as a reference point for when a level ends. Next map is one with comment icons like out of Super Mario Maker, supposed to appear like other players have left them, and we find out that Davey met Coda at a game jam. The door is established as a symbol of a simple puzzle to depict eras, having to pause to then let go of the past and move forward. The next one's titled Porn Stars Die 2. He then goes through a whole era of different modern prison puzzles with modern furniture and potential escapes, always just beyond grasp. But the final one, his opus magnum of prison puzzles, is one with multiple dialogue tree systems operated from a phone booth. Yeah, no connection to porn stars. Sorry to disappoint. The call says they are you from the future and comforts you. Honestly, that one hit me. Then I realized why it hit me, and we'll get to that. The next game is all about this mundanity, but it is just filled with the feeling of not being alone, as the companion is kind in how they treat you. But now you might notice that the narrator's interpretations may not be completely in line with Coda, as he states, "I really thought that's what it was." The next map is about meaning and fulfillment in being told by the teacher/society that it's your fault that you aren't the perfect example of society. But the perspective shifts to show that neither are they. There's a black hole hanging in the sky, sucking everything out of you. And the point is that these ideas we create as to self-worth can often be meaningless and spread by people who truly don't believe in them but are scared of what the alternative is. What's important about the game's experience that I think it's effective in its storytelling is that despite the narrator handing you these map experiences and guiding you through them as you get to the end of the game, you start to question how truthful he has been about the game maps he's given you. Next map has you on a stage as a performer to the masses. Honestly, this one hit me as being about social anxiety just as much about the pressure to be perfect. The blank person, only identified as happy for one thing, really stood as a symbol, and the dialogue tree is so awkward that you really don't know what to say. Prison bars falling and blocking from the lamp, in him getting no resolution. And who'd have guessed it, the struggling artist has depression! Shock! Gasp! Never seen that before! I've been there for different reasons, so the moment I started seeing the signs I thought, crap, he's gonna kill himself. But he doesn't, I'll just say that now before you click away in fear. Next game takes place on a Star Trek looking bridge in the middle of a catastrophe with a person reading truth on their head as the only dialogue accepting character. The next few games are basically explicitly Coda arguing with himself, desperate to find a solution to his own problems. It actually hurt to play this section because the game is so good at what it says it wants to do. It believes you can see this person for who they are in this games, and the person on the other end is in pain. I have to really give the game props for accomplishing that. It's creative burnout and depression dancing together, and it hurts to see. He sees himself as a machine failing to do as it is meant to, and the game gives the player a gun to shoot up the level layout into destruction. But now the narrator takes matters into his own hands. See, Coda has been moving into himself, and that isolation is something that the narrator sees as unhealthy. So Davey decides to show Coda's work to people, hoping that by seeing people appreciate his work, it might drag him back from his bubble. As the narrator explains, it doesn't. But the narrator got a kick out of it. The social attention, the praise, being seen showing someone else's work, and introducing people to something so good. The last game is The Tower, and it's distant, unplayable, and an end message to the narrator. To stop. To stop engaging, sending people his work, altering his games, to just stop. And the narrator is remorseful. The epilogue shows that the narrator feels horrible for his actions and in turn wishes to make it up to Coda, and wants the player to help him if they can. The narrator has a breakdown, begging for forgiveness, and the game reaches its end. Now we get to my interpretation, or a more nuanced version of the summary I just gave you. Coda is autistic and struggling to understand himself and his place with others. He struggles with social anxiety and depression and uses games as an outlet. But as time goes on, he no longer feels creative in his endeavors. But worse than that, Davey has been playing these games and modifying them to make conclusions from these abstract works that aren't intended, such as the lampposts and time modifications. Coda wants things to be ambiguous, so by these actions it becomes harder for him to understand himself. By viewing himself as a machine with a product that people consume, it simply becomes too much, and he despises the identity that people have given him. The narrator found importance in what he had to say, and that feeling felt good, but by identifying himself as Coda in this, he began to lose who Coda actually was as he grew. It's not as clear-cut as to teach a lesson, but it's an important discussion about interpretation, identity, mental health. I found the warmth of that house in the mundane cycle, the lamppost, the dialogue conversations. The options, they all make you think. And you begin to understand who Coda is, but that's always something you have to question, because you never truly know in re-examining it how much the narrator altered. It talks about deep issues without slapping you across the face with them, and I wish more games did this. Maybe it's a niche interest. Maybe there's more things to watch and engage with than walking around maps for an hour and a half in all the games you can find, but this? If you ever come into an argument about the potential for games to be art, reference this. It may not be the successor to the Stanley Parable people may have wanted, but by God, it stands on its own merits. So, do I recommend this game? Absolutely. This game may be a walking simulator, and I know that's a sour taste for many gamers. And it's not comedic meta-humor you can laugh along with. It's deep and meaningful in what it tries to be, and it's abstract as all hell. But it is a good experience. In its rawest form, it's games as art. That's something I know is more for discussion in how games are approached. But if this game was simply a movie or a collection of paintings, there'd be no hesitation that this is an artistic creation. It discusses depression and meaning in creators' lives and is meta, not in how it looks at games, but in how it looks at the people who create small indie ventures that are unlikely to truly reach notoriety. It's pretty short, and you can find a Let's Play of it easily enough. I would have one for you if the audio hadn't freaking corrupted. And the game's normally about 15 Oz dollars on Steam. I managed to get it for around 4 during a sale if you want to play it. Hell, you can get Stanley Parable and Beginner's Guide in a bundle deal if you want. Still, opt for a sale. It's a short game. You could probably beat it and still refund it under Steam rules. So go nuts. Thank you all for watching, and I hope you've enjoyed. This is my first review, and I hope I can carry on doing more in future. If you like what you've seen, make sure to leave a comment down below, leave a like, and hell, subscribe and ring the bell if you're really invested. I'm sure there'll be plenty more of these to come in future. And if you'd like to see more things that I've done, there should be icons on the screen for you to be able to find some of the other stuff I've done. Anyway, thank you for watching. See you next time.